Hello class, this is Dr. Darren Nelson again. Nice to see you guys. Hopefully you lived through last week and the week before. You're doing good and starting to understand the sequence in which we're doing this class and hopefully getting into it a little bit. And so I know it requires you some work, but I think it will be good for you, and hopefully you're seeing how the class relates to you in your daily life, at least. At least I hope so. So today I'm doing this overview here on Martin Luther King Day. I came in because I still had to do some work and get ready for the coming weeks. And even did an interview this morning in Laurinburg at the local radio station talking about our water resources in this area and also a little bit about climate change. If you're interested in that, let me know. I'll send you a link to it. Anyways, so this week we're going to be starting into sedimentary rocks. Last time we talked about minerals and talked about how we use our mineral resources and where we get our mineral resources, a little bit how we mine it and stuff like that. This week we're going to be going into a little bit about the rock cycle and start off with the rock cycle with surface veneer, or what we call sedimentary rocks. So this is going to be chapter 5 within your textbook, and so we're skipping around a little bit, and we'll get back to these other chapters at a later date. I think it flows a little bit better to go into this order than the order that they had it in, so that's okay. So as always, this week we're going to be learning some of the basics of sedimentary processes, the weathering of rocks, transportation of sediments, deposition of sediments, and the resource we obtain from these processes. Okay, so the objectives that we're going to be going through here is we're going to be understanding how weathering produces sediment at the Earth's surface. And by the way, there's a great in our lecture slides. There's a great concept map that goes through these processes that really connects things really well. So look at that. Use it to study from. It's a good resource. So these are often used as study guides to help you to understand what we're going to be the big ideas and subtopics that you should know about. So just remember that. So we're understanding weathering, what weathering products are, the different types of weathering, how different rates of weathering will impact the composition of the rock, and describe how sediment transforms into a sedimentary rock. We're going to be learning about the key types of sedimentary rocks and what we can learn from them. Explaining the basis for how we classify those rocks, and trying to figure out how to classify individual rocks. We need that in our discussion page, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We're going to relate examples of sedimentary structures to environments to be able to understand how they form and help us to understand their depositional environment. And this depositional environment is basically where that rock was deposited, so like a lake or a river or stream of some sort. Okay, so we're going to apply our knowledge of how these depositional environments control textures of the rock, the composition and the layering of a sedimentary rock to interpret how an outcrop or description of a sedimentary rock. And so those interpretations help us understand processes in the past and help us also understand and find resources that we use in our daily lives all the time. For example, petroleum, oil, coal, and other resources like that, sand and gravel that we use for asphalt and things like that. So it's important for us to understand that. So that next topic is regarding that a little bit. It's explaining how sedimentary processes are related to mineral resources, explaining how ores can be concentrated through weathering, explaining how clastic, chemical, and biochemical rocks can be mined, and what resources we get from these deposits. And then also the last one here is to explain the concept of sedimentary basins and how they explain why transgressions or regressions, basically the changing in sea level, occur, and to be able to identify the sedimentary patterns related to these regressions and transgressions. So as always, if you're interested about the major, there's information there for it, but let's go on to our reading. Our reading here is going to be chapter 5, like I said, a surface veneer. And then we also have a link regarding sedimentary resources. So please read that. I'm not sure why we have multiple links for it here, but I'll double check that a little bit later. But that's talking about how we use the sedimentary resources in our everyday lives, the minerals, our material that we get from it. Sorry. If you're still having problems with the e-text, please look at that. This week you will probably, if you haven't you're still using the trial period, you will have to use the temporary access from here, not the one from your trial period, because the trial period for some reason doesn't actually include chapter 5, and so I had to ask the publisher to give us temporary access to this chapter. So you'll have that access right here if you need to get that access in that way. By the way, the trial period should be ending towards the end of this week or the start of next week. So just make sure you try to get your textbook worked out if you haven't done so yet. The glossary here is terms that we'll learn throughout our discussion. Sometimes I'll define them in there, otherwise I don't. I just use those terms, and so it'd be good to go through here and look at the terms here to be able to understand stuff from our reading and also from my lecture slides. Now the lectures, as always, I put a link for the lecture slides here, but then I also put the individual lectures down here. And I would always suggest that you follow along with the lecture slides with the lectures as you go. That way it will help you to understand, and you can also make notes as you go if you do that. I don't know if I would print them out. Some people like to, but if you do, try to save paper and print from multiple to a page if you do. But anyways, all those are there. But this section has some great additional videos from what we call geoscience videos. It's a friend of mine up from NC State who makes these series of videos that are really good, and they're usually really short, and they help you to understand the concepts. So if you're not getting the concepts from my videos, come to these, and these should help you a lot. And so just kind of a hint there. The discussion page, this is an important one. I'm going to go to that discussion page a little bit later, so I'm going to come back to that. Let's go to assignments first. Assignments, last week was the beginning of the semester. We're trying to get everything, sorry, just like last week, I apologize. Last week we have two activities here. We have a reading quiz that goes over the reading. So do your reading a little bit, and you probably do a little bit better on that, and then your online activity. I have been noticing from some of the quizzes in the online, some of you guys who are using lots of tries. Remember, you have 3 attempts on each question, but each time you take it, you get less and less points for it. So it's better to do it the first time. What I notice here is the people who are using lots of attempts also get bad scores, and that usually tells me that sometimes students will go on here and not do any of the readings whatsoever. They'll go straight to the quizzes, do the quizzes, and they'll try to make the attempts. It's kind of like Russian roulette with the quizzes, right, to see if they can get the right answers. I promise you, by doing that, first of all, you're going to get poorer grades in the assignments, but you also I'll promise you will get poorer grades in the exams as well. So I find that students who actually go through the reading first, then do the assignments, end up getting higher scores because they don't have to use as many attempts, but also they retain the information better. So just as a side note, that I notice those things, and sometimes I'll even send you guys emails if I see that as a trend that actually occurs over time. I'll say, hey, make sure you do your reading, because it's very obvious that you're not doing a very good job, or you're not retaining it somehow by looking through your assignments and seeing how many attempts you use and the scores that you're getting. Now let's go back to the discussion page. The discussion page is somewhat similar to last week. Last week we actually looked at minerals and looked at individual minerals and had you guys do some little research on it. Well, this time I'm going to have you guys try to do a classification of a sedimentary rock. And looking at those sedimentary rocks, I'm going to ask you to make as many observations as you can. List those observations in your discussion board post. Then try to classify the rock. Try to figure out what the rock is, and give me some background of the depositional environment that you think it is. So you're going to post that. You're going to post what you think the classification is, and also you're going to post what you think the depositional environments are. So I'm going to go to this link here to get some more detail about this, and we'll talk a little bit more. And so I broke you guys up into 3 groups, and the reason is because I only have 10 rocks that I have you guys do, and we have 30 people in the class, so I'm breaking you up into groups of 10 to go through and look at this. So each of you guys will have a rock that you're going to actually identify. Okay. When you do this, please post your title called post. So you'd say Rock 1 Investigation at the very top, so everybody knows what you're actually investigating, right? So what you're going to be doing here is you're going to go to one of these rocks. Let's say I'm going to go to Rock 9. Okay, it will take you to here, which is a 3D model of a specific rock. So this rock right here is actually one that I have on my desk here, and it's one that I did what we call a photogramming, of basically make a 3D model of this based off of the photographs that I take. So I take photographs of it all around it. So you'll notice, so if you actually look at this and do the 3D model here, I'm not as good as some of these professional ones who do it. So there's an empty, well, you can see through it at the bottom, and partially because I'm doing this just from the surrounding here, and I can't get the picture below. If I did that, I'd have to meld two models together, and I just don't have the time for that right now. So I get good enough results with what I have here. Now on this one specifically, they have some annotations here that will give you some clues. It will help you to understand maybe what's going on in the sample here to look at your observations. So what you would do is you would go through the observations here, look at based off the clues. You'll list as many observations you can about that rock. Okay, I'm going to go back to, let's see here. Go back to, why is this not working? Okay, I'm going to go back to the models here. Well, let me do back for some reason. Because of how I'm recording it is why. And so if I go back to the discussion page here, and you'll see that was for rock 9 here. And so you would go through and post your observations there, and after you post your observations, you'll then decide on, well, what kind of rock it is, and also the depositional environment. Now I have put a basic chart here that you can use to help you make that identification. So you can say, well, does it react with acid or not? And usually in the annotations or in the notes somewhere, it will tell you if it does. So that will help you to understand if it goes back and forth. But be careful. Some of these rocks actually use even though it's one of these rocks up here, well, its cement reacts with HCl, but it's not what we'd call a chemical rock. Okay, so be careful with that. There's some tricky ones in there. But I do that on purpose to kind of give you guys some discussion that you guys can do. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to post that, and once you do post that, I'm going to give you an example of one of these. Once you post that, it will look like a lot like mine that I've posted here, except you won't have a video, the 3D model here, right? Because this is a different one that nobody's doing. But I go through here and I investigate this rock. I say, well, mineral grains are very small. I'm unable to distinguish them with a magnifying glass. So that means it's really fine grained. The rock has a grayish hue. Therefore, it has some organic material within the rock. And we'll talk about some of these clues are within our discussion board, and our discussion boards are our lecture slides into the book, right? It has distinct layering that infers that it's been deposited with the aid of fluid, most likely water. And since the grains are small, it's probably a calm water body, maybe like a lake or a shallow sea. In our rock listings, it doesn't react with HCl. I even have this rock over in the corner over here, but it signifies that cement and grains do not have a carbonate origin, so it's probably a silicate. And based off of what I know about this area, which a lot of the rocks will tell you where the rock was extracted from or sampled, I know that there's that this area is to be volcanically active, so I infer there may be some ash in the rock, which there is, because I know enough about the rock. And this rock here, I actually call it argillite, and I've labeled this one as such. Your guys' won't have a detail like that where it tells you what it is. It's just going to say Rock Lab 1 or whatever. But you can look at that model and help you get clues on the model itself and really what's happening here. This one doesn't happen to have any annotations, but the one I showed you before does. So anyways, that might help you here to get started with this. And what you're going to do on your responses, this is something that some people are having issues with the discussion board last week, was that they didn't notice that the responses have a specific response to it. With these responses, is what you need to do is you need to go in there and tell if you think the person that you're actually is marking this is marking it as either is their interpretation accurate or not, and tell why you think their interpretation is accurate or not based off those observations, or maybe even add a couple more observations to it. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to that specific rock that they did and look at it and see if their interpretation was correct. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope you guys have a good week. If you have any questions, as always, shoot me an email or put it in the general discussion board. Talk to you later.